Good afternoon, Zach. It's really, really great speaking to you, and thank you for taking the time, first of all, to speak with us at Jeppe Boats and Blades, but also, for your contribution in the past to the Boats and Blades initiative, not only in terms of financially, but the advice and the just introducing people to us in the past. It's really appreciated, and it's good to have this conversation. So, I guess the first thing is, why rowing? What drew you to the sport in the first place?
There isn't a good story there. I mean, it's just luck. When I was in primary school, I was at Hillcrest Primary, and I really, really wanted to go to Queen's High, which is where all my mates were going. And my mom was incredibly insistent that I had to go to Jeppe. It was a big argument between us for a while. Anyway, so I went at that stage. I don't even know if you still do, but at that stage you had to do an entrance exam. I went and did that, and then you got a letter, and the letter said, welcome, you're being accepted, etc., etc., etc. And so, and in that letter was a paragraph that said, look, you have to do a summer sport and a winter sport. That's compulsory. And your summer sport options are cricket, swimming, and rowing. And we recommend that you go on the October camp for whichever sport you choose. So that was while you were in standard 5 and, grade 7, you go on the October camp. And my mom had a very, very straightforward approach to the thing. She said, look, we don't know anything about rowing, but we know that you can't swim, and we know that you can't catch a ball. So off you trot. And that was it. And I went off, and I went to that October camp. The Irons took me there. And there were eight guys in the under 13 age group that year, exactly 8. And I hated it. It was just the worst experience of my life. I was an absolutely dreadful rower. I fell out of the boat every time. I just had no idea what I was doing. I was completely useless. And came back from the camp and said, I didn't hate the camp, but I hated the rowing. And I came back from the camp and I said to my mom, that's it, I'm out. This is awful. I'll learn how to catch a ball, or I'll learn how to swim. And again, she said, look, you can't do that because there's only 8 of you. And if you quit, then 3 other guys can't row because now you can't have a quad. And so that was it. And So she said in December, if other kids join in December, you can quit. And so I had 3 months to kind of last. And by the time December rolled around, I loved it. And it was, that was the start of it. And it's bizarre that next month it's been 30 years since I started. And I've had very few breaks in that time. Yeah.
That's incredible. So, just leading on from that, how was your time, or how did your time as a Jeppe boy and as an oarsman impacted on your adult life?
Yeah, it's a difficult one because it's a bit like saying, how has the sea impacted a fish kind of thing. As I said, it's just, I don't really know what life would be like if there hadn't been rowing. You know what I mean? It would be it's been such a fundamental part of my life over the years. I rowed competitively until about 2002. I didn't row between 2007 and about 2012. I didn't row. I was traveling overseas, and then I came back, and I kind of didn't get back into it. But other than that, I've rowed pretty consistently the whole time. And so, yes, it's very difficult to say. I mean, it's been a stress and a lot of work, and it's had a lot of positive impacts. But difficult to narrow down to a single.
Yeah.
As I say, it's just been so all-consuming over the years. Not all-consuming. I mean, obviously, I've led a life outside of rowing, but it's been such a constant that it's, I really couldn't say how it would have been different otherwise.
That's fantastic, yeah. And I know, so some of the things, I mean, we speak to guys that have, particularly the 64 crew, who up until 2017 still had the opportunity to row together, so that's, kind of like, 60 years of rowing just right there, and the guys are still together, and those friendships are still there, they don't go away. We had somebody say, and I've had to reflect on this myself, where they said, all the friends that I've currently got, and this is a person that had been out of school for 30 years, similar to me, in all the friends that I've still got from school were all rowers. I still know my rowing mates, and the other people I don't know, but my rowing mates, we're still friends. And that's quite significant.
Yeah, that is. Yeah. It's a funny thing. We, our coach, I mean, the 95 and 96 crews, 95, I think, especially, Ben Bernand, I mean, Ben was our coach, and we still keep in touch. We still chat fairly often. But I remember a few years ago, he said he's never met a crew quite like 95 who just actually didn't get on. And it wasn't that we were enemies, but there were some friendships in the crew, but they were friendships that would have been friendships outside of the boat as well. And it's an interesting thing. I mean, haven't really stayed in close contact. Now and then bump into guys from that era, and you chat and you catch up. But and I'm sure that there are groups that have kind of stayed close. But yeah, that sort of long-term school friendship hasn't been the case with me. And I guess part of that is also as people have kind of come into and outside of rowing. If that's the thing that binds you together, then when people stop doing it, But there's been some. I mean, there's still a few guys from that era that row. I know Matt Bell's still rowing. I think he's still rowing quite competitively. Kevin Detroit went on to go to like 2 different Paralympics. In fact, almost made a 3rd. So there's
Excellent. So I mean, Zach, as you mentioned, you're still pretty much involved with rowing and still active in the sport. And I know that you have a very strong view on the importance of government schools and their contribution to rowing as a sport. Would you like to tell us more about that?
Sure. Rowing in South Africa, I mean, I guess worldwide really, but I think it's particularly stark in South Africa. And I think it's even more stark in Gauteng. Gauteng rowing has a real problem because we don't have easily accessible water, big bodies of water. We've got, VLC, which is reasonable, Wemapan, which is quite small but doable, and then Rudderplot, which is logistically difficult because it's a long slog, and it's no longer like it was when we were young, where you could go out to Rudderplot on a workday morning. You could leave there at 7, you'd be back in Joburg at 8. It's just not the case anymore. You leave there at 7, you'll be lucky to get you by early afternoon. The traffic has increased, and so rowing in Gauteng's got a real challenge there. Plus, obviously, rowing worldwide is this big challenge around, well, it's very elitist, and just because of the cost of it. Now, when you add in those logistics in South Africa, that becomes even more expensive. And so it's particularly tough for public schools that have a very kind of sharp end of the budget. Having to think carefully about where that gets allocated, it's tough for them to keep going. But it is important. It's important that schools like Kes and Jeppe and Parktown and Germiston and Sachs keep going and keep rowing, because it brings a wider scope of people to rowing, socioeconomically. But you also need, you need the numbers. You need the numbers of different schools. And if we think about just since, if I think about having lost schools like Florida, General Smuts, what were they called? I can't even remember their name now. There was a school with a W that disappeared some years ago. We need these government schools. We need schools like Selborne, etc., to keep going, to keep rowing. Bring in a wider base, bring in more rowing, and they need to be competitive, because otherwise what happens is that you end up with you know, the St. Benedict's and St. John's and St. Andrew's, you know, maybe one or two others kind of always fighting for golds and everybody else. And that becomes demotivating. You know, we've seen that in senior rowing where the big focus has been at, you know, tucks over the years. And it's really hurt rowing more broadly because, you know, that's where all the gold sit. And so, you know, so it's important that we have a strong government base. Also, government schools, we've got scope to spread. You know, we should have government schools in Potch starting rowing. We should be getting them starting rowing, and you know, wherever there's a decent body of water would be great. Out in the Lowveld, you know, there's amazing bodies of water out there, and if we can get more and more schools rowing, then we have a better and better chance of this being a long-term survival sport.
Sustainable sport.
Yeah, exactly. A sustainable sport. Thank you. And carrying on. And when you have a look, I mean, it's such a silly little thing, but even when you look at like where our Olympic medalists have come from, consistently they've come from government schools, and that's not to have a rev at private schools at all, you know. But I think, I mean, if you look at our silver medal pair, they were from Kesson Parktown. If you look at the gold medal for, you know, they were from Germiston, Parktown. I think there was one two from St. Andrews, you know, but it's a real mix, and I think government schools are necessary to bring that bulk and that volume to rowing. Otherwise, we just become smaller and smaller and smaller, and more elite, and then more and more out of touch with reality, and the sport will fall apart in 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, you know, we've seen this as well. So in terms of some of the initiatives that we've been looking at as Bats and Blades, you know, we've seen that as well. And you know, we're a little bit more focused on Jeppe, and we're saying that there's no reason why Jeppe, with CSI funding and with some initiatives, cannot be the leading government school / leading school in terms of bringing boys through who would otherwise not have had the opportunity to row, and who can do it. You know, it's all very well, you know, the private schools being able to do this, but you know, in terms of the people and the scholars that we have access to as government schools, you know, they would never have had the opportunity to experience rowing for themselves. And for us, and for Jeppe in particular, you know, which is the Boats and Blades sort of focus, there's no reason why we can't be the leading school in not only in Gauteng but in South Africa to bring these people through. And it's number one, experience, and number two, you know, the sport of rowing will ultimately benefit from it. You know, wider pool, more opportunity. You know, why not? You know, that's vitally important.
No. And it you know, professionalizes the more government schools. You know, it's something. I mean, I think Devon did amazingly at Jeppe. I think he really got it started well. You know, I think Simon will do a good job taking that forward and kind of continuing to grow it and continuing to, you know, to look for that high performance. You know, you've got to. It's not just. We can't just have government schools making up numbers. And if you have a look at, you know, Kes a few years ago really threw a lot of money at it, again, through the old boys. I mean, they raised 3.5-4 million rand quite quickly, which they put into new boats, and it made a massive difference. I mean, you saw within a season, suddenly they had, you know, real medal potential, albeit again, you know, silver medal, which is kind of their tradition. But, you know, the fact is that they were able to compete much better. And, yeah, as Jeppe's fleet gets renewed, and this is where you guys are doing such a great thing with Boats and Blades, as we start to grow more, so Jeppe will come up to that surface as well.
We believe it. So we're looking forward to the season, trusting that there will be a season, and that the guys will be able to compete. You know, we look forward to seeing results, and because I think, you know, that additional sort of competition, you know, does the sport as a whole a lot of good. So yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So just in terms of, the last question, and I know this is always a difficult one, from your time as a Jeppe oarsman, is there a particular memory, something that you'd like to share with us, something that you recall with, I suppose, great fondness, you know?
This is a tough one, and I've really chewed on this because it's difficult to kind of pick one. I mean, there were a few of them. There's a bunch of really tight races, and some of them won and some of them lost. And I always think those are the ones that you enjoy the most. I mean, even having lost, I remember in '96 it would have been in the first eight. I mean, we'd won, I think, the first 5 or 6 races of the year, and then we lost a race. Funny enough, to Kez, that we lost by a ball, but it was the first race we had lost of the season. But it was an incredible race, really tight, and thumping the whole way down. In fact, in '95, yeah, maybe that was a good one. '95, the first 4. We had a very inexperienced first 4. I mean, we had it was Paul Smith and Brennan Borum and Stephen Q, who I don't think any of them had rode first eights before. I was some like snot-nosed under 15 coming up, and we went down to Natal Champs, and we lined up against, or maybe it wasn't Natal Champs, but it was on the on Camps Drift, and we lined up against this Kez 4 of Sasha Merritt and Courtney Morton, McLeod, and I can't even remember his name now, Michael Wilmot, who had all come back from Junior Worlds the year before. And so, I mean, there was no, we didn't have a smoke, we didn't have a chance in hell. And Paul Smith was stroking our boat, and I'm not really sure I'll ever understand what happened there, but something clicked, and he went a little bit nuts. And I mean, we came down at some ridiculous, into the mid 40s rate, and we somehow held on to this Kez crew, and actually we're leading them as we hit the bridge at Camps Drift, which, if it's about 300 meters to go, and then their rudder broke, and so they veered off and went into the bank, and we won it. But that moment of real wow, we can compete at any, I mean, the following week they put us back in our place and beat us by 10 seconds or something. But it was, just to have that moment of really, really playing among, punching above your weight was great fun. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, Zach, thank you so much for your time. It was great speaking to you. And and then just in terms of everybody else, great. I know that a lot of people often comment on looking back on all of these interviews and how they enjoy them. And, please feel free to go check them out. It's on the Jeppe Burton Blades YouTube channel. And for all other information, please do check out our website. It's jeppeburtonblades.co.za. Thank you very much.
Okay. Greg, if I can add one last thing,
please do.
I would just say to everybody, everyone is looking back with lots of fond memories and stuff. Come down and start rowing again. Just come down for a paddle. I think everybody in their minds remembers rowing as being 800-900 minutes a week, and it doesn't have to be. It's a paddle every 2 or 3 weeks and just having some fun and getting together with some mates.
Well, thank you, Zach. And on that note, that is actually something that Simon's talking about, and Simon Jeppe Burton Blades, in terms of getting the guys to paddle again, and just to reintroduce them to Jeppe rowing, and saying, listen, it's still going. These are your memories. Come check it out again. So thanks for that. That's actually really, really important.
Be good to do. Cool, man.